Hey, everybody. How are you? It's good to have everyone back. We have Senator Shane Jett, Rockstar Senator from Oklahoma, with us again today. Welcome to the show, Senator.
Good to be here, Charity.
It's exciting. Well, Oklahoma made national news. Again, we tend to do that. For such a flyover state, we sure do ruffle feathers a lot around here. Um, Ryan Walters was great when he was here to help us do that. He kept us in the national spotlight a lot. But recently, we had another mosque try to be put into the Broken Arrow district, and they already have several mosques. And the community kind of said, we see what's happening in Dearborn, Michigan. We see what's happening in Texas and in New York, and this is enough. And so the people went in, and I want to say it was a lot of people does not do it justice. I heard there was 1,300 people at the last meeting. I mean, the line was going all the way around the block, and it was not a single file line. People couldn't even get in. They had overflow rooms that were full. It was something else. They ended up saying they weren't going to put the mosque through because they didn't meet the specifications needed, like with the runoff, the sanitation, the place that they had wasn't really sufficient for what they were asking. And so they weren't told no, they were told to find another piece of land. And what's interesting is they've been sharing on Facebook. Some of the Islamic leaders are saying, "Well, we're going to sue you again, and we sued you before." And that's so interesting to me because they weren't told no, which I personally think they should have been told no, because that's we've talked about this on this show. We had Debbie Georgatos and John Bennett on. They should have been told no because Sharia law doesn't seek to peaceably coexist. They seek to take over, and that's the difference. It's not a freedom of religion. It's a this is anti-constitutional, your beliefs, and you seek to impose them on the rest of society. That's what your law actually says. And so I think they should have been told no, but they are saying they are going to sue. And it's just like a Democrat, just like a liberal to throw a fit, whine, have a tantrum. It doesn't make any sense to me because they weren't told no. They should have been told no. If it was Charity's world, they would have been told no. But they were just told to find another piece of land, and they're still throwing a temper tantrum. I'm tired of the liberal ideology. I'm tired of them taking our laws and twisting them to mean something else, where they think that because we have freedom of religion, that somehow means religions that would inhibit freedoms for all Americans.
Yeah.
Um, I'm frustrated, but Senator Shane Jett, you have some bills coming up on this deal. Not necessarily on the Broken Arrow project, but on Sharia law altogether. So I'd like you guys to weigh in. What's happening in Broken Arrow? What's happening in America? Do you feel like there is an invasion?
So there's an ideology that is antithetical to Western civilization and has been at enmity with Western civilization from its inception. When we talk about the Crusades in Europe, that was a direct response to 800 years of subjugation of Europe, specifically through Spain. So there has always been this clash between Western culture and the freedoms that are afforded the public, whether they're Christian or not, through the Christian principles that are codified in our Constitution and part of Western culture. And so the other thing that is of interest also, Charity, is that a lot of Muslims who have immigrated to the United States immigrated specifically to escape Sharia law applications like we have in the 1980s when the Shah of Iran was toppled and the Ayatollah came in. And there are a lot of individuals who came to the United States because they wanted to escape that extremism.
Mhm.
And many of them have actually converted to Christianity. And they have not only embraced the Western principles, but also the underlying principles that make those freedoms possible. Because the only way you can be truly free is if you've been set free by Jesus Christ. And so I'm looking at not only an approach to thwart any efforts to undermine the constitutional provisions of the Constitution, but also to encourage those who genuinely love American freedoms to embrace those and not try to supplant them with an ideology that, quite frankly, they fled.
That's exactly right. And I think it's the lack of history and just the lack of understanding of precisely what it says, what happened, right? Because that goes back to what Ryan was fighting. A lot of adults walking around don't have the education to understand exactly what we did escape. And
Yeah.
then you've got, you know, Allah's divine law, which is the code for Sharia law. And
Mhm.
it actually dictates that they are obligated to take over society. And by the way, they're allowed to lie and be peaceful until caliphate is declared, and then they are obligated to be violent to take over when they feel like they have enough of a stronghold in a community. This is written in black and white in their laws. That's not something that you allow to infiltrate. I'm okay with them having a mosque. I'm not okay with them having six. And we've got to keep an eye on a group that is telling you we're here to take over society and enslave you.
And break laws. There's a lot when you dig deeper into it. They have laws that they think rank over our laws. And again, that's the whole Constitution thing and freedom. Everyone thinks, oh, we're trying to like, go, freedom of religion. We're trying to like push it out. No. We still have laws that you have to abide by. I'm okay with whatever you want to believe in, however you want to live your life, as long as you're following laws. Because I mean, to be neighborly and be able to coexist with different cultures or different viewpoints or different religions is fine. But we have laws of the land that yours don't get to come and supersede. And that's the thing that I have issue with. When you really dig into it, it's pretty dark.
And our Constitution. Don't supersede our Constitution.
Exactly.
And Senator Jett pointed out the difference between ideology and religion. They always take it to a religion argument. It's not a religion argument in this case.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Well,
So-
it's not, and you're right, Kendra, and sorry to jump in, but the ideology is intertwined into the political ideology as well.
Right.
And that's where they have trouble extracting. The Constitution, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So we didn't want what the King George and Great Britain had done. It says the government is over church. No. Our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence in particular says we acknowledge God as the one that provides these freedoms. And in their system, it's an intermingling of church and state to the extent that it controls everything, and therefore is antithetical to the constitutional provisions that says the government can't impose its religion on you because God provides that, and the government cannot prohibit you from freely exercising your right to worship. So we have a needle to thread, because what we don't want to do is violate the tenets of our own Constitution that provides the freedom of speech, the freedom to assemble, all these freedoms that we use to preach the gospel, while we're trying to fight a system that is political in nature, that erodes the very freedoms of the individuals who are trying to adhere to it and superimpose it, which would violate their freedoms as well. So we have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves as we approach this in love, because at the end of the day, we also want to evangelize those and show them, like, if you really enjoy Western freedoms, I need to tell you about its author and finisher, and that is Jesus Christ, whose teachings taught us how to behave towards one another in such a way that allows you to live in freedom. And the American experiment in freedom is firmly built on that foundation.
I hope the United States sees what great senators we have here in Oklahoma. Thank you.
Yeah, I keep trying to get him to run for a greater office, and he just laughs at me and says, "Talk to God." I get myself in trouble begging him to run for governor.
But we do the same thing to you, Charity. Why don't you run for governor?
That's stop it. No, I am the
shots over the bow. Shots out over the bow.
You guys are funny.
How did that bus feel, Charity?
You're cute. No, thank you. You know, with the Sharia law in Oklahoma, though, we have actually had some progress against it. Now, Shane, please tell me if I get my facts wrong, because I might have something wrong in my timeline. But we did pass a state question 755 that where the people overwhelmingly said they do not want Sharia law in Oklahoma. But then the Supreme Court overturned it and said, look, you can't do that. And then we had a bill pass, and I think it was ran in 2012 and was passed in 2013. And it says we don't allow foreign governments to come in, which is going to include Sharia law, because that is a foreign government, and we don't allow that to come in. Now, the issue with that is it is still kind of vague in its wording, and it does not give the police and the sheriffs the education to understand what they're looking at, and the difference that Islam is not necessarily a religion, but it is a political infrastructure. And so, I mean, that's correct, those facts, right?
That is correct. And remember, the Supreme Court justices that are there now, many of them were appointed by Democrats or were Democrats who switched to Republican to be appointed by even Republican governors. And that is because our Judicial Nominating Commission excludes quality candidates and basically handicaps the governor from his ability or her ability to be able to appoint someone that they choose. They're given an option of three, which often will be two people that no one's going to appoint and the one they actually want. So we have to reform that. Two, the Supreme Court justices who are there, we just removed one setting state history when we removed Justice Cogger from the bench, and came close to removing two others, because the justices that are there today are justices who were there before the Republicans took over the House in 2004, when I was elected the first Republican ever to represent Pottawatomie County in that House district. And then in 2008, when we became a Republican-controlled House and Senate. Those judges are still there from before the era when Democrats were firmly in control of Oklahoma. So our work is cut out for us, because a lot of those judges do activism and their ideology guides them rather than the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Oklahoma. So those are things that we have to be very careful of. And they cite principles like separation of church and state and freedom of religion. The bill that I'm running, Charity, is basically the same approach we use for critical race theory. Instead of saying you cannot teach critical race theory in our public schools, we said you can't do the specific tenets that is critical race theory, because they'd have just changed the name disingenuously and continued teaching the principles. So we went and attacked the principles in critical race theory, which is a Marxist race-based ideology. Right. In my bill, we're identifying the most egregious manifestations of bad application of Sharia law, one tenant at a time. So we're identifying those things. And quite frankly, it provides protection for all Oklahomans, whether they're Muslim, Christian, or atheists, that they cannot be penalized or abused by a parallel system of justice that is derived from a political caliphate.
That's amazing.
We put really good teeth in House Bill 1775. What are the teeth in your bill to keep that from happening, instead of another bill with just no consequence? Don't break it or else.
I'd be happy to share that with you. This is a deadline week, so I pivoted to do this, but I will get those to you, and as soon as we get a bill number assigned, I'll share that with you, Charity, and you can share it with your brigades. But basically, it's codifying that it is illegal to do these things. So it's a prohibition, and so then the court system would be able to weigh in, because the legislation has been put in place to be adjudicated.
Awesome.
That's amazing. I do want to point out something that you said, that the justices were Democrats and they decided to be Republican for a minute. I want to just throw out a shout out to Alabama, and I would like to figure out how to do this in Oklahoma. And Shane, I won't fault you for not doing another bill in time for this session, but in Alabama, they cannot run for as a Republican if they've been a Democrat. I think it's I think it's 2 years. Or if they've given to a Democrat candidate or have registered as a Democrat, they cannot run as a Republican. They have to be a Republican for a minimum amount of time. It might be 2 years. Don't quote me on the time frame, but I sure do like having the time frame there. Alabama got that right. That's pretty awesome. I don't like how they can just switch and then go run the next day, because we have a lot of that in Oklahoma.
Yes, and we've been layering that in, and these are what we call now trans Republicans, where they just identify as a Republican. I identify as a woman, therefore I'm a woman. I identify as a Republican, therefore I'm a Republican. And so what we have, I think, is like a 6 months. So it's really minor amount, and that's just to change party affiliations. But we do have that issue where you have individuals who will register contrary to their conscience, contrary to their ideology, just to disrupt the political system. In fact, you have Gettner Drummond, who is urging Democrats to re-register to Republican so they can help him get out of the Republican primary. Also, if you look at 2014, the teacher unions were urging educrats and educators to re-register as Republican, to get rid of Republican Janet Barisi, and to elect closet Democrat, fake Republican Joy Hoffmeister into the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And then in 2018, there was the teacher walkout orchestrated and funded by George Soros, where they were busing in professional agitators from Dallas, Texas, every day to make sure that the teacher walkout was populated, and then they were urging them then to, one, re-register, and two, run for office. And that's whenever famous trans Republican Chris Kennedy funded a bunch of liberal candidates against the most conservative core House members, and there was a huge purge that was even covered in the Wall Street Journal. So Oklahoma has been in the crosshairs of those who want to see it undermined. Whenever you have every county, every 77 counties voting for Donald Trump, they're trying to find ways to undermine it. And that's also why you have State Question 836 with Antifa New York agitators in OSU signing up students to get on the ballot so that the Democrats who refuse to re-register as Republican can go ahead and disrupt our Republican primaries and bring down and turn purple or blue the red state that God has blessed us with.
So for those that are unaware, 836 is where they're trying to put in jungle primaries. Jungle primaries are worse than open primaries. Right now we have a closed primary system. So when you go to vote, the Republican Party is going to pick who the Republican candidate's going to be. The Democrat Party picks who their Democrat candidate's going to be. The Independent Party is free to do the same. However, they choose not to. And so they just whine that they can't jump on one of our tickets, which is a whole different story. Run your own candidate. I'm all for it. But you're not being left out. Nobody is ostracizing you. You are a party, run a candidate. But with the difference with the open and primaries is the open primary, then you can come in and say, I want to vote as Republican or Democrat, regardless of how you're registered. With a jungle primary, they throw in ranked choice voting because everybody is on the same ticket. And so what it does is when you have a state like Oklahoma, where you encourage people to run for office, you are going to have more Republicans and less Democrats. Therefore, you are just the math in itself. You're really minimizing the ability to ever get a conservative again, number one. But it's like allowing China to legally vote in American elections. That's how we feel about Democrats being able to vote in the Republican primaries. And so we're fighting that here. But you're right. It's because all 77 counties voted for Trump 3 times. So this is the stuff that they pull. That's exactly correct. Well, I also want to, we have been dealing with DHS. Now, there is another story in Oklahoma that has happened recently in, I think it was Chickasha. Was it Chickasha, or I get those confused?
The little boy, yeah.
Yes, with the 12-year-old boy that was missing. Turns out he was not missing. He ran away because he had been horribly abused at home. And then it's come out all of these stories of these different kids where teachers and different neighbors had reported this kid and other kids that wound up dead. This kid at least is alive, but they tried to get help from DHS and couldn't get help in an abusive situation. Then we find out there's patriots that are actually fighting the good fight, where kids are being medically kidnapped, given medicine against their will, against the parents' will, against the doctor's will, and they harass those families. So DHS is broken. When you take in criminal justice classes in college and they introduce the DHS system, that's how they word it. They say the system's broke. And so that's how it's introduced. That's it. And so you have some legislation to try to fight that. We've been talking a lot about that on the show. Can you tell us about what's coming up this year for that?
Absolutely. We were working on a case where DHS come in on a Friday afternoon, pick up a young boy, and they do that intentionally so that the parents don't have time to go get legal representation, and to challenge that, and that gives DHS a good 48 to 72 hours to have access to their kids, at which point they take their temperature, put them on antibiotics, prep them for chemotherapy or whatever they're wanting to do, and then the parents don't have an opportunity to have their day in court before they've already done some damage to the kid. And sometimes they're even vaccinating the kids while they have them in their custody. And the other thing is, Sooner Care covers all of that health care, which means your tax dollars cover it. And so they are making money for the state through the OU Health Children's Hospital, through Sooner Care, and DHS also gets paid per day per child they hold in custody. So if they drag their feet and hold the child 2 days instead of one, they double the revenue they get from federal and state dollars over time. They're a $3.9 billion operation, and they're always trying to protect themselves. So some of the legislation that I'm running, Charity, is removing the protection that DHS put into place that said we House and Senate members have to go to the President Pro Tem or the Speaker of the House to get access to the folders to be able to scrutinize and see what they're doing to these families and to these children. So removing that bottleneck that they put into place. The other thing that we're removing is the secrecy that they wrap all the court proceedings in so that no one can talk about how DHS abused the family. In fact, one of the cases that I'm working on, they're saying, okay, we'll give your child back to you if you promise not to tell anybody what we did to you.
Yeah.
And the other thing is attorneys who are fighting this on behalf of families cannot review legal precedents to see what has worked in prior cases and to be able to point to that precedence because they wrap it up in confidentiality so no one can see what effective strategy can be used to fight DHS. And so we're trying to unravel that so that we can actually, the families can say, I want the world to know what you did, and DHS don't get to hide behind we're trying to protect the security and privacy of this poor child that they've been abusing. So those are some of the things that we're putting into place that I hope will close some of the loopholes that have been used by DHS to prey on families and, quite frankly, enrich themselves at taxpayer expense.
And then it becomes almost impossible for any litigators, any good lawyers that even want to help these families to even do anything. We were just talking about the woman that was on Tom's show yesterday. Did I get her name right? Katie?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An absolute rock star.
She's amazing. And again, I encourage everyone to watch the show. Tom runs a show from yesterday. I'll try to include it in the comments here, but it's just sad what this family went through from start to finish. Everything was done unlawfully. And when you look at it, you're like, this is just common sense. This boy needs to go back to his biological parents. But at the end of the show, of this heartfelt, just horrible story, Tom looks at her and he goes, this is almost a case that would be impossible for even every good attorney in the world to join together, even if we had the millions of dollars it would take to fight it. So they've created this machine that you can't even legally do anything to fight the corruption. It's horrific.
That's right. And not only that, Andrea, we have the chairman of Health and Human Services who took to the
Shane, you went sideways.
I'm looking at you sideways because
you're sideways. You're screen sideways.
I don't know why it did that. I wasn't touching it. Just flip.
Flip your phone. There you go. There we go.
Okay. So when we went to the airways and we talked about what they were doing to one of the families, within days, the chairman of Health and Human Services, who has been notorious for blocking a lot of red meat protection for vax abuse and all of these types of things, went in and said that horrible things had been said about DHS and about him personally. And so it's reprehensible when someone who's elected to be a watchdog for the taxpayers ends up instead protecting a state agency cabal that, quite frankly, is his responsibility as the chairman of Health and Human Services to hold accountable. And so what we have is instead someone perverts their mission, instead of representing the taxpayers, represents the agencies that are preying on taxpayers.
And these agencies have whistleblowers from the inside. She revealed a whistleblower who left the agency because she was so appalled by the corruption and the disgusting things going on there. And again, you have to watch the show to get all the details on it. But I mean, so we have people, the good people within DHS saying, whoa, we're breaking every rule in the book. And we're taking kids away from their families that should not be taken from their families and then placing them in dangerous homes. And even though people are calling us saying this child is in a dangerous home, someone needs to do something about it. Even when the FBI and certain other organizations have gotten involved, agencies have gotten involved, these kids still don't get taken out of these horrible homes because there's so much corruption. And then you've got the whistleblowers screaming. And again, we're still saying that our hands are tied and we can't do anything. It's disgusting.
That's right. They also take them out of heterosexual homes, put them in homosexual
That's
homes.
what this story's about. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is intentional. And also within the hiring practices at DHS from whistleblowers we're hearing from is if you've expressed conservative views or Christian views, you need not apply for advancement. You're going to get increasingly punitive work assignments and things of this nature until they get out. And what they do is they use the HR as a way to elevate those who have far left ideology and to squelch, suppress, and move out of positions any of those who are actually adhering to wholesome family environment where you have a mother and a father. And so a lot of times it's they punitively go after families and then almost as an insult to injury place them in homes that do not share ideologies with the family from which they took those parents. The other thing that we're seeing is it looks like there's a pattern of designer state-assisted kidnapping of children. So there you will have Black families who will have their baby taken and given to a white family who also happens to work for DHS and things like that. And that's happening here in my district that we've been documenting. So there's just a lot of evil depravity that has happened at taxpayers' expense and on the taxpayers' dollar.
Well, I'm excited to see what comes from this. You have another bill that it's called "Don't Pass the Trash," and that goes right along with this because it's protecting criminals, protecting those that target kids.
Yes.
And so tell me about that. And I want to know about the name. Don't Pass the Trash. I love the name. How did
Absolutely. Well, and this hit our radar, Charity, when we were elected in 2020. In 2021, early in session, we got a call that there was a cover-up for over 15 years of a coach who had been grooming and molesting boys. And then, as we discovered, also a girl in another district before he came to Shawnee. And it had been reported and covered up, and the protections were in place. And so whenever I started writing legislation to try to fix that, and we got to watch that man go to prison, get put in handcuffs in Pottawatomie County. When we started delving into it, we found out it was very common if a superintendent came to someone who had injured a child, groomed a child, touched a child, they would say, "I know what you did." And before they could say anything else, the coach or the teacher or whoever the pedophile was would hand in their keys and say, "I resign." And then they could scamper off to another school district and pick up where they left off. They keep their reputation intact. The school ends up avoiding an embarrassing lawsuit. And it's a good old boy system, one protecting the other. And the public school system themselves coined the term. Yes, we call that passing the trash. When they allow someone who's hurt a child to resign without consequence and go to another school and pick up shop where they left off. That is called, in the public school system, passing the trash. So I ran that legislation 2 years in a row, and Senate, air quote, trans Republican leadership refused to hear it. And I hear that one of the freshman senators has been assigned that so that she can run it and get credit for it, because that's what they do. At the end of the day, my focus is simply this: protect children from predators so we can tell their parents they're safe in the public schools first and foremost. So if they want to take credit yet again for some of my legislation, as long as we're protecting children, I'm good with it. But I'm going to expose them for what they are and what they're doing. So yes, pass the trash, allowing adult predators to scamper off and leave broken children in their wake so they can go do it again and again and again.
And on my time on the State Board of Education, Senator Jett, it happens so often. It's happened right here in Norman. It's happened metro area schools. And sometimes it's even the facts that the parents don't want to put their kids through reporting it or having to testify to it. We need parents to be brave and make that happen too, because if you're not, you may be saving your kid from a testimony, but how many kids are going to be abused, because your kid didn't want to speak up. And having your kids speak up in that way is a great value and integrity in that child and something wonderful to teach them.
That's right. Well, encourage is what's lacking in a lot of these kids. Even I'm afraid to be exposed. I'm afraid to be embarrassed. I'm afraid to get called names. My wife and I were served with papers by the attorneys at Shawnee Public School, and then they wanted to go through our personal cell phones, our notes, because they wanted to punitively go after the whistleblowers, teachers and coaches who come and disclose to us, and administrators and school board members. And so You know what? And we had a legal bill. It cost $14,000 to be able to stop them in courts from being able to have access to our records. And my attorney called me and said, Shane, we're going to have to give them something. Or they're going to have punitive action against you. And I told my attorney, I said, this may sound like bravado, but I would rather go to jail than to give up one name of an adult that had the passion and the courage to come forward and speak up for children that have been abused. And here's the other thing. In Revelations, I think it's 20 or 21, it says, it lists all these evildoers that will go to hellfire. And the very first one on that list is cowards.
Yeah.
Cowards are the reason why predators get to hurt our children. Cowards in the state Senate leadership, cowards over the chairmanships, and cowards of people who won't come forward because they're afraid to be embarrassed or maligned or misrepresented in some way. And they allow predators to go free and hurt more and more children. Cowards will go to hell.
Amen. And there's blood on their hands. I mean, I'm
There
so
is.
sick of the inaction and the just like the pass the trash. I mean, I'm sitting there going homeschool, 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 because you see it happen all the time. And one thing that I keep thinking of in Charity, and all of us talk about this all the time, is the public school system wants to own my children. They want to be able to have private conversations with my child about their sexuality, about health and wellness, and they don't think that they have to tell me anything. They barely want me to see inside the school to see what they're teaching. However, when a teacher is removed from a class, like this is again the story that we covered on Tom's show yesterday, teacher was removed from the class because he got in legal trouble. He was caught molesting children in a public area, and the FBI was involved. They remove him from the classroom. He's been teaching there for 2 years. The parents raise their hand and they go, excuse me, why is he not here? And they don't tell him why, because they don't have to tell us about anyone's background or if they've been arrested for something like that. But they want to have private conversations with your kid and not tell you anything. They want it to be like a closed little club where you don't get in and get any access at all.
Absolutely. They protect themselves and they are children vulnerable, and they defy the God-given parental right to raise your children.
And we have the parental right to know who the heck is teaching our kids.
Absolutely. Two pieces of legislation, additional pieces of legislation that I'm running, Andrea, is there is a pilot project where they're bringing health clinics into the schools. You may have seen that. I'm working with Deborah Campbell, and we have put in a piece of legislation that says, I'm sorry, you can't do that. No. The other one is they're wanting to bring in social workers and permanently place social worers in our public schools so they can scan who they want to acquire and make money off of the families by breaking them. I filed a piece of legislation today that says you cannot have social workers embedded in our public schools. Public schools have been mission creep. They want to funnel as much money through it as possible. Instead of focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic. They want to do social and emotional learning. They want to collect data on them to train them to go into sectors of business or industries that they want. It's a command and control model that is maximizing dollars at the expense of our children's education and in defiance of the parental right to be able to raise your child.
Well, I think that's the bigger issue than the money. It's the separation. That's part of the communism, right? Part of the communism that we're fighting is you separate the children from the parents. The parents are not the authority. The parents are not smart. And the school-based healthcare, we've had Deborah Campbell on talking about that. That's horrifying. Do you understand? They want to take over the healthcare of children. And there are places where when that gets too far, you don't go to the doctor to get your child's health records. You have to go through your child. What? It totally removes the parent from the process completely. And people should be horrified. You know, I've told the story a lot, but when my son that is 28 now, he'll be 28 this year. He was in kindergarten, and I had my baby in the back seat to where I could catty corner so I could, tend to the baby while I was driving. And the principal told me I needed to move the car seat over to the other side because that was more convenient for her for 2 minutes of my day. And I told her, I don't know who you think you are, but no, that's not happening. And this was, 500 years ago. If that was the attitude then, she thought she could say in my private car what I did with my child's car seat. And this was, I mean, so what, 23 years ago, because he was 5. I mean, that's insane. I can't believe in how far it's gone. They don't want you involved in the children's healthcare.
Mm-mm.
The social emotional learning he was talking about is horrifying. There are stories in Texas, people, that is horrifying. That is where they take the social workers and then they listen to your kids and they twist it how they want, like every narcissist does. And they can say, well, your kid has this issue or that issue. We're going to go ahead and medicate them, or we don't think they're fit to be with you, or whatever. But the whole thing is removing the parents from the equation. And we can't allow that to happen. If this is happening in Oklahoma, it's happening in your state. And
I'm in Nevada. I am so screwed. I need Shane to move here. I'll
No,
establish
we're keeping
residency. You can live with me. We'll figure this out. But I'm in Nevada, and we've had some fights recently. And in the last couple of years, there was fights. Joey Gilbert's a great attorney out here. He ran for governor, and he's been fighting all sorts of nonsense in our state, forever. But he was helping the Douglas County School District for a while, and there was a school board member who literally stood up, and I was just shocked. It's like when I saw what he said, it's like I was, oh my gosh. He stood up and said, "Listen, we're allowed to do all these things because we're smarter than the parents."
Yikes.
He literally said that the parents are stupid. The parents have to work all the time. They don't pay attention to things, and they're ignorant. They're so dumb that it's better for us to just give them full control over our children because you're too stupid to understand what we're doing here. He said that.
Part of it has been society has fallen asleep, right? Like, so when the brigades start showing up to meetings, the first thing that they're asked is, who are you? Why are you here? Because they're used to the public being asleep.
Yep.
This is largely our fault as Americans that we have let it get this far, but it is not so far gone that we can't stand up and take it back. We have to be involved, and we can't just let them have it because they're trying to take it. Very, very interesting. But, part of the reason they're getting away with this stuff is because people are being elected. And so we have trans officials that weren't really officials, but they get to act as officials because the elections,
they identify as.
as we had the regime. And regimes are installed. That's why when Biden was elected, I said, you guys, this is not, people are like, well, he's the president. You need to pray for him. He's the leader. I said, no, he's not the president. That is a regime, and that is a dictator. Presidents are elected. Administrations are elected. I will never recognize that man because he was installed. And so we have this issue across the country. It's not just happening with our presidents. President Trump got in because we won so big they couldn't cheat.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary because as they're trying to divide the country, I don't know that we can continue to win so big that they don't get away with cheating. We have to fix the elections. And so for people to think, well, we got Trump in, it's all good, I'm going to go back to just working and watching TV and moving on. You can't do that. We still have to fix this mess. Yeah. And so Andrea and I have been involved with a lot of the election integrity. She had me in this group that Bannon was leading for a while, that I was on these calls for like 3 hours. But it was amazing listening to all the different states and all the different ways that we were fighting election integrity. But we do have some bills that you're running here. And Oklahoma probably has one of the better election systems. I have to say that. And it still is, it still has some places where it's not awesome. So tell us what you've got going on with that.
Well, we have a state representative and House Freedom Caucus vice chair, Jim Olson, who is running some election integrity. I think it's House Bill 1005 that is going to shore up some of the photo IDs that's required. So he's on over that committee, so he's running point on that. We'll be co-authors and supporting that going forward. But you're exactly right. If we can't, they're like, oh, you make the left says the Republicans are trying to make it hard to vote. No, we're trying to make it hard to cheat, and that's why you're screaming.
That's right, and well, that's been the issue the whole time. I mean, that's why they want to do the jungle primaries, because they want to cheat. They want to make it unfair. And so, Andrea, what are you seeing in Nevada according with that?
Hope? No, not a whole lot of hope. I mean, it's hard because Nevada and Arizona had some interesting things happening before COVID. I mean, a lot of states did, but you know, the mail-in ballots. I mean, the hardest thing for me to understand is the common sense behind securing elections, and what I constantly fight with people as far as this. I mean, we at least have a governor, I think, that tries to do things. Sometimes I worry that he can be a little bit of a rhino, but he does try to push things through. But as far as the election integrity, I mean, I was told a few years ago when I was working on some races that we thought that there was some sketchy things going on. I was told that I could never work in politics again if I kept running my mouth on election integrity issues. So, I mean, that was coming from like the GOP. They said, just stop with the whole election integrity issue bit. And of course, I just got louder. So, I mean, I think for me, the thing that drives me the most nuts is that they've legalized the cheat, you know? So it's like, if we don't get a handle on the day voting, the hand counting, and the ID situation, and we still keep doing these mail-in ballots, it's like, there's nothing we can really do. But I keep telling people apathy is not the answer. And so what I'm trying to do with campaigns that I'm working with is keep all of us with our eyes and ears at the polls and watch it, and going in there and asking questions and keep the pressure on and make them know that we're watching them. I've been doing that like forever. And when I walk into like my local polling places, they all roll their eyes and they're like, oh, she's here again. I mean, I walk in with cameras and I ask questions. I say, what happens with the ballot when you do this? And they like never have an answer. And I go, well, there's numbers over there and there's a missing box. What happened to number 66 or whatever? They go, oh God, this woman. But I mean, that's what I keep telling people is we just have to keep the pressure on like a federal level. I was just talking to Tom about this on the national level. You know, the voter ID push and the same day and the hand counting. I mean, it's just common sense. It's insane. And then also the, you know, Annalena Pool, I'm not saying her name right, but the, you know, getting people who are dual citizens out of Congress and stuff like that. Like, we're seeing some good push on some transparency issues that should never have happened.
Well, the RNC has done.
It's wild to me that we even talk about it, because it's like, this shouldn't even be a thing. You should definitely have to show your ID to vote. Like, why is that even why are we talking about that?
It shouldn't even be something we discuss.
No.
The RNC has done a fantastic job with their legal team and the constant lawsuits all across the country, trying to get this thing righted. And I just want to let you guys know, when Andrea is telling you the story about her walking in and with the cameras and she's all, that is not exaggerated at all. I walked through the airport with her with COVID, and she was embarrassing. She calls people out for wearing a mask, told them how stupid they were. And I'm like, you know, they can't help it. They're just friendly.
I was being nice.
She was not real nice. That is a lie. But
I was coughing a lot. I was coughing.
Anyway, that was not exaggerated. Let me just tell you, that was for real, the real deal. That was something. But I do want to, so we have some of the good guys in Oklahoma. And I'm optimistic that there was enough of the seats turned that just maybe, Shane, you'll be able to get more done this time. We still need to send more reinforcements.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the biggest obstacles? So when we do get the good guys in and people get frustrated and they're like, nothing is getting done. Okay, so tell us about what that is. Why people get frustrated. They've got the right guy in office, but you're still struggling to get it across the finish line. Tell us what the obstacles are and why that is.
Well, you have leadership who have, for the last 5 years, been focusing on being a conduit of legislation that's directly tied to contributions from the lobbying class. So there are no contributions assigned to rural communities who just want to know that their election ballots are being voted and the person who was voted for got to win. There's no money associated with that. There's no money associated with preventing pass the trash. No one is lined up to write checks for that. And so and we know that there's an active investigation going on for a pay-to-play racket by the Federal Bureau of Investigation's organized crime unit, because these patterns are there. And so you also have those members who have the lowest conservative score, like 60s and below, are the chairmen. They're also the never Trumpers. They're also the one that's been blocking vax protection for the public. And so our frustration is we elect individuals to go up there, but if you don't have a critical mass to elect leadership who reflect those conservative values, then those who do not, that are focusing on ingratiating themselves to the lobbying class, appoint their friends to those committees, and they are the bottlenecks that get anything done.
Mm-hmm.
So we have been in a battle for leadership. We have a chairman for the education committee who's been ingratiating himself to the union, teachers union, who's now running for state superintendent. Well, we ran legislation to block DEI so that we could protect our 18-year-old young girls that feels like their life calling is to go teach. They go to OU or OSU, to some of these teaching schools, and they're taught to teach American history through the prism of critical race theory and diversity, equity, inclusion. And they think that's history. That's how history is taught. And so they've been indoctrinated. So that's 5 years. For 4 years, he blocked legislation, not just that one, but other conservative initiatives. This past legislative session, he cherry-picked a variety of DEI bills, put it into one bill, and ran it under his own name. Now, why did he suddenly have a change of heart? He didn't. He needs to prove to Oklahoma voters that he has some conservative creds. And so he went and found conservative bills that he had been killing for 4 years. So that 18-year-old now is a 22-year-old teaching in her schools, and she's been indoctrinated for 4 years, thanks to the chairman of the education committee, who's now trying to convince everyone that he's the appropriate replacement for Ryan Walters. Nothing could be further from the truth. So we have, and there is a thing that we have to do as voters. We've got to vet our candidates better.
Yes.
And here in Oklahoma, we think if you're a veteran, well, you're a patriot.
Mm-hmm.
And we love to get behind veterans. I'm a Navy veteran. I love the Navy and this country, and I would kill or die for it. But we have individuals who come from the East Coast who come into Tinker Air Force Base, and they establish shallow roots, but they do not have our values. They wrap themselves in the flag. They put their uniform out there, and the Oklahoma voters go and vote for them because they believe the lie that was crafted by the consultants who put all the talking points that Oklahomans care about. But when they get into the legislature, they start protecting DHS instead of holding them accountable. They stop blocking DEI and CRT legislation because that's how they ingratiate themselves to the teacher union class. And they're from the East Coast, and they do not share our values. And what we need to do is ask the tough questions whenever we're interviewing them, when they're asking I had a Senate candidate who came to my office, and I asked him, he was in the Army, I'm Navy, and I said, hey, you're an Army guy. Let me quote a constitution, and you tell me if that's the one you swore an oath to. And I literally quoted the Constitution of the Soviet Union to him. The church shall be separate from the state, and the schools from the church. And he, without blinking an eye, says, yes, that's the Constitution I swore an oath to.
Wow.
I said, I know your Army. Let me repeat it back slowly and clearly so you can keep up. And I said, the church should be separate from the state, and the schools from the churches. And he said, again, affirmed, yes. And I looked at him and said, quite frankly, you are part of the problem.
Yes.
I said, you swore to protect and defend the Constitution against all threats, foreign and domestic, and you've never bothered to read the Constitution. And I just quoted the Soviet Constitution to you. And so what we have to do is, one, be informed ourselves, and two, ask those tough questions, not yes or no questions. Ask questions to see what the true heart. If they're not bought and paid for by the blood of Jesus Christ, then the Holy Spirit cannot lead them and guide them in all truth. Right. These things matter. And if they're not committed to the freedoms that are provided by the Constitution through the underpinning of Christian-based principles from Western culture, then they're going to govern accordingly whenever they get into the legislature. And the lobbying class, they're quick to reward them if they represent the lobbyists and punish them if they represent their district.
And we just today published on the Substack, so go to freedombrigadenation.substack.com. We call it Rhino Hunting Season has begun. Season's open, and everything you just said, we talk about. We talk about discerning what a rhino is, asking the tough questions, and then see how they answer, and all those things you're talking about. There's things that you can do to be able to vet and make sure you're not voting for a rhino.
Absolutely.
So check that out, please.
And here's another thing. Come to the Capitol. We're open from February to the end of May. Find out when your legislature meet. Come and meet them. Meet their secretary, their executive assistant or legislative assistant. Get to know their names. Fill out the form that says, I was at your office and I care about homeschool or election integrity. That type of feedback is very valuable. We founded the Oklahoma Freedom Caucus in 2024. Last year was our first time on the floor. And what we do is we provide the conservative analysis for each of the bills and get a recommendation to vote for or against based on those conservative principles. So if you have conservatives who are sincere about their conservative principles, but they're bombarded by lobbyists and leadership trying to lead them astray, Freedom Caucus will help guide them to vote their principles. If you're advertising yourself as conservative, that should actually mean something. It should reflect how you vote. The other thing is, just because you have one House and Senate member that you can vote for doesn't mean you can't influence others outside your district. You just have to understand how to connect the dots with them. If they're in leadership, then they are blocking legislation for the entire state, not just their own district.
Exactly.
So reach out, find out who's those committee chairmen is that are blocking good red meat and legislation, and put pressure on them. Also, if your parents live in a different Senate or House district than you can call that House member and say, hey, I live in Shane Jett's district, but my mother lives in your district and goes to church at First Baptist Church. And she and I were talking about this issue, and they're listening because that call is now directly tied to a real vote, a real person, and cascading conversations that can impact their reelectability.
Amen.
So take an inventory of your sphere of influence. Where do you work? Where do your kids live? Where do your parents live? Where do your siblings live? And then find out where they are. And you can put it in a database. We have an easy portal, oklegislature.gov, lower right-hand corner. You put your address, and it'll tell you who your House and Senate members are, and you can contact them.
Amen.
Well, I was about to ask you, what can the public do? But you were jumped in front of me. Way to go. Guys, it is important that we're involved in this process and we don't just let them go. And you can also, when you're in the Capitol, if they're in session, you can go sit in the gallery and watch. You have to be quiet. You can't yell at them. But
So I can't go.
You can watch what's going on. So Andrea is not allowed to go in the
I'm not
gallery.
allowed to go.
Hey, you can yell them from my office, Andrea. I'm in room
Perfect.
417. You can also send pink slips into the Senate side and green slips into the House side while we're in session, and send them in and say, I'm your constituent when I want to talk to you about this or that vote. It's rare that constituents come up there. There's a constant barrage of lobbyists, but if an actual constituent shows up, it makes an impact. So don't underestimate your ability to hold accountable and actually get things changed, because many of them ran for office because they were genuine and sincere about doing the right thing. And if we don't help them see that, and we don't let them know, hey, you're representing lobbyists, you're not representing me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go tell my pastor, and I'm going to tell my family, and we're going to hold you accountable for that. If you don't have those conversations, you have no one to blame but yourself.
And you're not supporting them, because the lobbyists are scary. I have a friend who is in the House in Missouri, and the things that she's fought, they harass them. They harass them in and outside of those rooms, and they harass them sometimes at home. And I mean, it's scary. And so again, like you said, there could be good people who ran, to do good things, but they're very overwhelmed. They need you there to back them and support them.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, Shane, I appreciate your time today, guys. Go to freedombrigades.com. It takes 4 hours a month to take back your community. When you work with other people in your community, if you take back your community, you'll take back the republic. Don't forget to check out our shop page. We're in a war, and where you spend your money matters. When you are buying from the big box stores, anywhere from laundry detergent to food to clothing, you're poisoning yourself. When you buy from patriots that make everything from natural, and it's God made, and you're funding patriots, but you're also giving yourself a better product. We've got to get away from the big box stores. They're in bed with the people that are trying to enslave you. So go check that out. We've got some special deals for you at freedombrigades.com. There's also a link on there for Tom Renz. He's a big partner with Freedom Brigades, so that'll be great. Shane, Kendra, Andrea is going to be in town in June. So we need to all get together and have dinner. Tom will be here. So let's have a brigades dinner and get all the Gabe Woolley. We'll bring all the favorite people, and it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be great.
Amen.
Awesome.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jackie.